Bom dia.
Bonjour.
Welkom.
안녕. Willkommen.
欢迎 bienvenidos.
What was that?
What's up, y'all? Welcome to Solid Ground.
Hey y'all, welcome to Solid Ground.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to Solid Ground.
Where we meet up once a week to learn about God's Word and encourage one another.
To learn about God's Word and encouraging one another.
And where you are always welcome to join and express yourself and feel like you're part of a family.
Be a part of the big family.
And feel like you're part of the family.
And feel like you're a part of a giant family.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And don't forget to mask up and stay safe.
Okay, and welcome everyone here and everyone there. I see you. Tonight we've been going through a post-Romans series about kind of an overall vision of what's unveiled in the Bible, especially in the New Testament. Like what things do we need to see as believers to live a full and healthy Christian life? So we've touched several things. Tonight we wanted to touch God's economy, which if you haven't heard the phrase or you haven't heard us dig into that before, it might sound like a peculiar thing to say or wonder where that comes from. So I'm actually just going to grab, not this, Brandon. That's not this. Brandon, could you read this first verse right here at the top of the sheet?
First Timothy 1, 3, and 4. As I urge you, while God so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies, which promote speculations rather than stewardship, economy, from God that is by faith.
Okay, so why do you think I added that little word include there, Rebecca? You know, I do like that. It is untitled. That is coincidental to why I picked that word. Yeah, so steward, like this is the ESV is the translation of this verse here, and it uses the word stewardship, which is that's a good translation. The Greek word in this verse, like in the original manuscripts, the word there is oikonomia, which we've literally transliterated as economy. I mean, it's, oikonomia, economy. You get the picture. Like, so oikonomia, which in Greek was just house law. Actually, Abigail, describe its definition. Economy is.
Economy is the emphasis for the Greek word economia. The word is in two parts. One, oikos, meaning house, and two, nomos, meaning law or administration. It is a household arrangement for distributing the riches of a family to the members of it.
Okay, so, and stewardship, I'm not bashing ESV in any sense here. Stewardship is actually a really applicable translation. What does a steward do? A steward takes the goods and distributes them appropriately, to who needs them. I like economy partly because it's distinct, it really, because it is in essence the same word as what's in Greek. It kind of hangs on to its own sense. So stewardship does keep this sense of distributing, being responsible for something and distributing something. It's a little more specific than just generally economy. And the reason I like economy is that, like America has an economy, by this Greek definition, there's a certain economy in the Hawthorne household. One or both of Hannah and I will go to the store and we'll get food, bring it home. Typically, Hannah will turn the food into edible dishes, and then we'll feed ourselves and the baby. He'll throw miscellaneous bits to the dog, and then I'll wash the dishes, put them away, rinse and repeat. So that there's an economy about how the food comes to the house and gets to the mouth that it's supposed to get to, plus cures, because baby. So the Hawthorne house has an economy. Well, guess what? America has an economy. It's much more complex, and it's much bigger than the household economy of the Hawthornes. Makes sense. So, in what is the what's kind of the general content, would you say, of the American economy? Like, what's the basic unit of the American economy? Cash, dollars, like U.S. dollars, right? Like, you don't use yen in the American economy. Well, yeah. You don't make most transactions in America in cats. That's fair. There are economies like that. It might be nice. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so how are you not? You're not broke in America when you have dollars, right? You have some number of dollars, then you can play the game. You have some of the basic unit of the game. Well, God's economy, as it's talked about in the New Testament, there is some stewardship involved. There's some receiving and distribution, preparation and distribution of goods in that sense, in the sense of stewardship. But there's also the sense of capital, a currency that you see talked about in the New Testament. So there's some sense of, there's some kind of cash, you could say, in God's economy. So without reading what Rebecca apparently has already read on the outline, what would, I see your eyes, what would you guess the cash in God's economy is? Destiny gave a circular answer. All right, what do you think? Give me a guess, Rebecca.
Like the glory of God.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I would say that's part of that. That is part of the right answer. Okay, so I put what are God's riches? The next point on this outline here is what are God's riches? And a few of the things that I listed here are the riches of God's grace. These are just outright named in various verses. The riches of God's grace, the riches of God's glory, like Rebecca mentioned, the riches of God's kindness, forbearance, his long suffering. So what's the common thread? If you're going to generalize from these, what would you say generally the riches of God are? God. Yeah. 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 So all of those touch on God's person, right? Like there's not, like God's not distributing his cows. He's not distributing Bitcoin, some kind of like cryptocurrency. It's not even like moral credit. I think a lot of us, we wouldn't say it, but our concept is very easily the currency in God's economy is karma, for lack of a better word. Kind of this tally system, how good and bad I may have been. But that concept is nowhere in God's conversation with us. That's not his evaluation. His cash, so to speak, is himself. And so anyway, the rest of the outline is kind of explaining how that even plays out, because I can't distribute Drew as a currency, not and survive, nor would it go very far. There's not that much of it. But the one, do what? It's it. Yeah, okay. There's more of me than there once was. Not that much of me. So the one other thing I wanted to pick up, Brandon read these verses here in First Timothy, and so Paul says, I urge you when I was there, not to teach anything else, not to teach any other doctrine, nor devote themselves to myths or genealogies. That was popular then, apparently. Jews were all about genealogies, by the way. Which promotes speculation rather than the stewardship or the economy from God that is by faith. And so what's the problem? And I kind of put it on the outline for you, but what the problem with all of these other teachings, all of these other things, is that they distract you from God's economy. They distract you from receiving and participating in this, the transactions of gaining and interchanging increments, for lack of a better term, of God's person. Because if you're teaching moral things, then you're focused on your own person. If you're teaching religious things, not moral, but actually religious, as in, whether you're good or bad, you should do this ceremony, you should do, worship should be this way or that way. It's like, well, in various contexts, maybe worship should be one way or another. But has it distracted you from the person of God? Because if so, boom, you are off of God's economy. Because you can handle worship exactly however it is it needs to be handled in that context within God's economy. By engaging with God's person, gaining, which we'll talk about how that happens, gaining some of God, dispensing, which we'll also talk about, passing along some of God, and kind of collaborating and coordinating how worship should play out tonight or this week, whatever. So the practical result can be exactly the same, but you may have missed this economy, this participation and dispensing of God himself. And Paul's argument is, if that is so, then you have missed the point, which is a big deal. That's the biggest deal. Okay, so move on. God has a good pleasure which he purposed in himself. Dustin, you read maybe like half of this and then pass.
This is the good of God has a good pleasure to distribute himself freely. This is his purpose, his will, and ultimately his glory.
Go.
He wants all the riches of his being to be distributed to us, to be enjoyed by us, and to be expressed through us. To carry out this purpose, God made a one, a divine plan, with an arrangement for achieving himself.
Okay, so I had like 15 verses on here for this, and it was, I didn't have a statement, so I had to trim, had to compress. So anyway, the point of this is good. This economy, this, because some translations will translate economios here as a plan. God has a plan, which is true. There is a plan. The American economy is planned for better or worse at various times. And so someone has laid out rules causing it to play out the way it plays out. That's true. That is true of God's economy. God has planned and arranged the universe and all of our lives so that his economy, which is pouring out of himself into you, and you exchanging the God that you've experienced with others and him, all of that happens in a certain way, and that's intentional. Well, he didn't just do that because it had to happen some way, just kind of like rolled the dice. It's like, well, I guess, 7's over there, 7's on the dice. 6 is over there, and 5 is over here, and Dustin gets 4, whatever that means. Like that's not the way he arranged things. It's not arbitrary. It actually, it pleases him. those words are used explicitly when Paul's writing in Ephesians about God's plan, God's economy, his organizing way that he's going to dispense himself. It's in a way that is pleasing and satisfying, that's joyful to him. And that's good for us to know, because we could go, if we go about, once we see that there's a certain way that pleases God, there's a certain way to approach interacting with God and gaining God that pleases him, that he wants it to happen this way, then doing it another way intentionally is at the best negligent, but it can kind of be insulting. It's like if Brandon and Dustin, they have a certain way. I don't know if y'all have a certain way you handle food and dishes in your house. I know when official, unofficial, yeah. Single guys have official, unofficial, very unofficial rules about how the kitchen works. But if they have a way the kitchen works, and I know that, if I don't know and I just come in and make a bunch of rice, I'll sit over here and cook some chicken and do what I want. Like, well, screw you, I know what you're doing, so it's fine. But like 5th or 6th time I've been there, I've watched them cook. They've told me how I'm supposed to cook, and I still just walk in and YOLO my way around the kitchen and do whatever I want. Like, I'm at the best negligent of the economy of Brandon and Dustin's kitchen. That's the most charitable interpretation, and I think you can obviously extrapolate other motivations there. Maybe I'm not just trying to insult them and be mean to them. Maybe I just care more about myself and my own way than the way they do it. Maybe I do it better. Brandon, I can't see Dustin. That's why I'm only picking on Brandon. Dustin, my way is objectively better than you and Brandon's way of running a kitchen. So I'm going to do your kitchen my way, okay? That's no, that's everyone who's civilized knows that's not okay. It's not your house. You want to do that, go to your house. Yeah. Well, that's, that's the way we are with God. Honestly, all the time I come to God my way. I'm like, all right, Lord, I don't feel great this morning. I'm tired. 5 minutes. I'm gonna sing a song. Hit me, glory. Here we go. And God's like, yeah, we're not gonna talk for 10 minutes because you just need you to drop your way, because I have a way. I have a way that properly distributes me, and that way pleases me. That way makes me happy. So let's do it that way. So anyway, it's really, to me, it's really, really key to see and appreciate that there's a certain way that pleases God. Yeah. And the funny thing is, you could literally sum up that way in the standard Bible school answer. One word Bible school answer. Jesus. Yeah. But that, at face value, that sounds trite, but it's as you unpack that, what's really cool is that the way God distributes. Okay, you have an infinite God, right? He literally is. He is what everything you can experience is within. That's weird. The entire universe. It's silly to ask where in the universe is God, because the universe is within God. There was God and there was no universe. And then God made a universe. Where could the universe be? The only place the universe could be is in God. Colossians actually says this, all things cohere in him. We're made, are from him and to him, unto him, and all things cohere in him, talking about Christ as God. So it's if you ever just want to work your brain a little bit, think about eternity and then realize that God is eternity. Yeah. Right. I know. Yeah. So yeah, that alone kind of works the noodle, So you have a God, you have a person, a being, because he's not just like the force or something, you have this person who is so infinite that everything infinite you could see, like the infinite sea of stars, the framework that the infinite sea of stars exists on is within he who is so much beyond that nothing could exist without. That person wants to serve up little slices and experiences of himself. And so the way he did that was become a person. So it's like, so we were saying the basic increment of the American economy is $1. Like the fundamental increment, like we call a quarter because it's a quarter of $1. So if you get $1, you have one slice of the American economy. Well, do what? You want to know why they call it per cent. All right, we'll talk later. The basic unit of God's economy is one experience of Christ. This infinite person, God, everything that he is, he has all these rich. He doesn't just have glory. He has riches of glory. He doesn't just have kindness. He has riches of kindness. It's like you can say, like, oh, Brandon has money, but Elon Musk has money. It's like you can have money and you can have so much money that you could buy the town that has the thing you want. It's like totally different orders of magnitude of the same thing. Technically the same thing, but on a scale at which it's something totally different. I have some kindness in there somewhere. It's down there. God has riches of kindness, unreasonable, unfathomable. Like the only way to define his kindness is in context of it's God's kindness. It is a totally different type. It's so vast. So it's like every aspect of him is like this. And the single increment of dispensing that is each time you interact with this person, Jesus. Something about this, many of all these aspects of God are shining through this person every time you've had a little interaction, and sometimes most of the time these interactions are way more subtle than we even know. Usually way more always gets into you every time you interact with Christ than you know. Anyway, that's a phone, like 45-minute conversation. So anyway, that's the way that pleases God to dispense himself, is for you to interact with his son. I had like 20 lines about this, but it just wouldn't fit on the page. It did fit on like 4 pages, but I didn't have statements. Yeah. Yeah, bring it on. Okay, so God has an economy, which, okay, how would you define economy without looking at the page? You just walk in. I get
Oh, me?
Not Dustin, he was already there.
I was like ready for him to answer. I guess something that brings monetary.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, so this economy. Do what?
Because that stands for economy.
Well, no, yeah, normal. Yeah. So it's kind of the same sense. So in economy in English, to catch up, comes from oikonomia in Greek. We literally just like put the word and changed, made it sound good in English, versus how it sounded in Greek. Made it less awkward to say. And by and large, it means the same thing. And so unlike, in the American economy, each increment of American economy is $1. What is being dispensed isn't dollars, but it's God's person. And each increment, like a single bill in this economy, is each interaction you have Christ. You know, you get some little increment of God's person added to you. Well, okay, so if I give you dollars, if I give you cash, what would you do with the cash? That's very abstract, and it doesn't tell me what you did with the cash. That's what you do with money in a lot, like an abstract sense. But what do you do with? I'm handing you cash. What do you do with it? Like right then? Oh, I take it from your hand. Take it from my hand, and you put it in my wallet. You put it in your wallet. Okay. What is a wallet? So literal. So literal. What's a wallet? It's a money holder. It's a container, so you put money in it. All right. Oh, so Venmo. I'm going to Venmo you money now. Yeah. Which is like layers of abstraction away, but it's fine. Get it. Where does the money go? Money comes out of my bank account and goes to your bank account. So what is a bank account? Okay. Rebecca's game. She's down. Venmo ready. So what is a bank account? Money holder. It's a money holder. Yeah, it's a money holder. Okay. So the American economy is, this flux of dollars to move value, and it's dollars moving back and forth between money holders, wallets, Venmo, bank accounts, whatever. What are God's economy is the movement of God's person from himself to people, and surprise ending among people. We'll get there. What are the containers? Do you just like hold it in your hand, if it's like shining, ephemeral, glowing, like Harry Potter memory style, like experience of Christ? Don't lose it. Is that what it looks like? No. So what's the container for an experience of Christ? You. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Okay, so God created us as vessels. That's the next point here. Baby, I think. Oh, sounds like that book. All right. So, you want to read these? Sure. First, God needed.
First, God needed some vessels to receive them. So he created man. Like a glove made from
Okay, so that Genesis 1:26. Awesome verse, out of space. He literally says God. Okay, so God, made the heavens and earth. Yay, made part of the waters, did this, did that. Divided light from dark. Actually, those short series of verses are really deep, like unfathomably deep, and they actually apply personally to you and give some map of your experience with God. So just like read it again, think about that, come back and talk. But specifically, okay, so God named some things God made, and named some living things God made. Name some categories listed in the Bible that God made. Animals. God made birds, right? It says God made birds. On a certain day, God made the sky, the land, and sea. So he made the animals of the sky how? According to their kind. The animals of the sea, according to their kind. The animals of the land, according to their kind. And then he made man according to his in his image and his likeness. So it's like the pattern is, hey guys, I made this according to its kind. And I made this according to its kind. I made this according to its kind. And I made you in my image. So it's like you can't ignore the sequence here. Like we are made in God's kind. Which Paul actually, like when Paul was preaching in Athens, he makes the point. He's like, just from observing humanity, and life, you understand that man is of the race of gods. There's something transcendent about man. There's something about man that is more than just like thumbs and a good forebrain. You know, like we're not just monkeys with two less, like no thumbs on our feet, and a bigger brain. There's something transcendent about a human being. Well, why? Why did he make us this way? You know, he made us this way because he needed containers. You know, and you can't, I can't Venmo money to Brandon's wallet. It's not that there are different kinds of containers. And I can put cash in Brandon's wallet, or I can Venmo his bank account, but I can't put cash. Like I can't physically take cash and stuff it in his phone, in his Venmo account. Nor can I Venmo money to his wallet. There are different kinds of containers. And so I put this diagram on here. I think most of you have probably seen it before. And in Genesis, God formed a body. You know, says he formed a man from the dust of the earth, and then he breathed the breath of life into his nostrils. It's like the whole. It's really cool. God made those, and he made those, and he made those, and then we get this picture of he intimately like got down in the dirt and made Adam. Like he made a man with his hands, seemingly out of red clay, and breathed some mysterious breath of life into that body's nostrils. So it's like way more intimate than the interaction with all the rest of the animals. The other ones, he's like, all right, let there be some birds. All right, let there be some fishes. You know, let there be some cattle. Okay, I'm gonna make this man. I'm gonna breathe into him. And so it says he formed him out of the dust of the earth, breathed the breath of life into him, and he became a living soul. And if you trace those words through the Bible, body, soul, and spirit come up over and over and over as unique parts of a human being. And so we, you know, anyway, body, soul, and spirit. That's another, like, let's grab, there's several hundred verses that you can pull out about that and talk for hours about it. It's very cool. Dustin loves to talk about it in detail, don't you, Dustin?
I do. Let's talk about it.
All right, so, you know,
Let's talk about it.
pause the video if you're on it and find Dustin, talk, come back. Here you are. Okay, that's enough, Dustin. Thanks. No more puns. Okay, one reason I like this depiction, this body, soul, and spirit. I said that God, the goods in God's economy are his person, right? So that's literally, what literally are the goods of God's economy? His person, dispensed into humans as the containers. What are some metaphors that Jesus uses in the Gospels? There's two particular that are kind of repeat that you could say some are about God's economy. One is pretty obvious. It's a metaphor Jesus uses in his parables. It's shiny. It is used as money. Gold, yeah. There are several parables about gold, you know, where the master, you know, or, you know, various figures representing God are dispensing gold, which actually symbolically always represents the person of God in the Bible. If you follow that thread and think like, oh, what does this gold represent? Totally makes sense that this gold right here represents God. So there are those representations. Can anyone think of another parable where somebody special is dispensing something interesting? A sower. Yeah, a sower sowing seed. Well, do what? So what's cool about this is, and these actually are in parallel. You know, God dispenses talents of gold. The talent is like 50 or 100 pounds of gold. By the way, one talent, if you have one talent, you're not like a loser in God's economy. Like, one got one talent, the other got 2 talents, he's a little better. One got 5 talents, I mean, man, that guy, you know, too bad I'm not that guy. You got like 50 or 100 pounds of gold, go do business. Wow. I mean, that's like can you carry, Bianca, can you carry 100 pounds? Not for very long. What's going on?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What is like 50 and change, 50-ish?
Oh, yeah.
You can carry like 50, 60 kilos. Yeah, So I'm going to give you as much gold as you can easily, like, with difficulty, load to your car. It's gold. You know, it's like pricey stuff. Go do business. I'm going to be back. You know. So the idea, his whole idea was multiply, like, do something productive with this gold. Multiply it and come back. You know, because those are the ones who are praying. You know, the one who had 2 came back 4, 5 came back 10. The one who had 1 buried it in the ground because he's a loser. And, you know, Christ is like, Master was like, hey, you're a loser. Anyway, that's fair. Loosely interpreted parable. That's another story that Dustin's willing to talk about, to immortalize his bad times. The other parable I think is so cool is the parable of the sower. You know, the master, the sower, comes and he takes something unique, seeds, and he just throws them everywhere. You know, and then he goes on to talk about some of these seeds produced 20 times themselves, some 50, and some 100 times themselves. And so again, there's that thought that he came with something unique, distributed it, and it multiplied to be gathered back in. The reason I love, so one of my favorite goofy interpretations of this 3 circles diagram, and the reason I colored it loosely the way I did, you have a body, right? Paul at one point calls our bodies an earthen vessel, like a clay vessel. Well, the reason he says that, Adam means red clay. So like Adam and Eve, Adam means red clay and Eve means living. So it's like Adam, like the red clay guy. You know, like that's what his name meant. Like essentially made of like walking red clay. So you, in some sense, you're walking around in a clay vessel, like a clay pot, you know. Well, if you think about, like, if you're gonna plant something, you have this precious little seed. This seed is gonna grow up and make so many seeds, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna make delicious bread. You can make like special oatmeal out of it. I don't know. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with this seed. It's super valuable, you know. You got one up. So you're gonna take a precious little pot, good pot. You're not going to take a dumb pot, like a leaky, crappy pot. You know, that would not be smart. That's what God does. You know, any reasonable person who isn't God would take a good pot that doesn't leak. You know, and they're going to take it. Now you've got a pot. But you don't put seeds in pots. You put seeds in dirt. So you take a pot. The pot is to hold and the dirt is to hold the seed, right? So you take a pot, put the dirt in it. The dirt is you. The body is, your body's your body. It's pretty self-explanatory. The dirt is you. Your dirt fills up. You know, and the seed, let's be real. We all feel that way some days. The seed, I'm not much part of that. It happens. But what's so cool is the seed is so little of the contents of that pot right away. You know, I've got this pot with dirt, and I take a tiny little seed and I push it in there, and I put it on my windowsill, and I watch it, and I watch every morning, or however often you put the water. I'm not good at this. Yeah. I'm very thankful that God's a better tender of seeds than I am. The point is, we start out this way. We were a pot with dirt in it, and the seed that brought Adam to life had withered and died. So all of Adam's descendants were just pots with dirt. And by the way, we weren't good pots with nice dirt the way Adam was originally. When Adam's sin fell, that life that was in there died. The dirt went bad, so it's probably clayish sand, and his pot cracked. That's a pretty good way to imagine what, in this sense, Adam became. So now, whatever valuable was growing in Adam is dead. The dirt in him isn't full of life anymore. And if you add water to it, it's probably just going to dribble out. So that's the way we come. That's the way we are when we grow up. So then we get saved, and the Lord amazingly comes in and takes this immeasurably valuable seed and sticks it in the worthless dirt of your cracked pot. And he starts watering. That makes no sense. But like I said, God has a plan. God has a way he likes to do things. And there are a lot of verses that talk about how God does not pick good people for his plan, for his economy. God picks crummy people because the point is, what is growing in you will obviously not be you. It will obviously be God. It will glorify God. You know, when God is expressed in Dustin, God will be glorified, not Dustin. Everyone who has known Dustin for all of his life, or even for 30, 40 minutes, I don't know. Dustin's pretty good. He can kind of hold it together for a good hour and a half of the time. Anyone who's known Dustin for a solid 3 hours, when they see God expressed, will reasonably say, this God is amazing. This God is so amazing, he could express, I mean, Dustin's good. Like, Dustin's like fun, he's a nice guy. But Dustin is not like glorious and wise and whatever God needs to be to you right now that he's going to be to you through Dustin in that interaction. Dustin's not that, and yet you experience that through him. How did that happen? Well, it makes you realize there must be a God involved in this situation. Well, that's why he leaves us kind of broken pots and messy soil, But what's so cool is that when this seed, it's green, get it? It's green in there. When something new is planted into your little pot and God starts watering, your pot is still cracked. Spoiler, your body will, I hate to tell you this, you're all young, all of you, but Abigail are younger than me. Your body doesn't last forever, So it's like at some point, your pot will crack. And that's that. It just, here we are, fallen human beings. But this seed that God plants in us doesn't leave the soil alone. As God starts watering this seed of Christ in us, then what does it do? What is the first thing a seed does? It sprouts. And it puts out roots out into the soil. Well, when Christ is planted in you, he starts putting out roots. And if you rummage around in the soil, wow, that's good fun. If you stick your fingers and rummage around in the potting soil of something you planted, if you planted like 10 minutes ago, spoiler, nothing happened. So if you got saved 10 minutes ago and then you go rummaging around in there, spoiler, it's just like you were 10 minutes ago. Not much has happened. To the dirt, to your soul. But if you give it, a week, and then you go rummaging around in the dirt, you're gonna find roots. The seed has expanded out into the dirt. And what's cool is the roots will actually improve the dirt. They hold water and they hold bacteria, and fungus, like beneficial fungi and stuff. There's a whole ecosystem of positive life hosted on these roots that turns even bad soil into something really life-giving and nourishing. Well, that's what happens as Christ grows in you. God waters you a little bit, day by day. You're still a broken leaky pot, so the majority of the water just right out the bottom. But that seed absorbs what it needs, and those roots are spreading. So you got that first seed, and then increment by increment, experience by experience, you're getting a little more of this same God that was planted in you, and he's actually spreading out and growing into the soil of your person until at some point, what's in this broken pot becomes so impressive, people stop noticing the pot and they start noticing the person, And I think surely we've all seen that. Surely we've all been around someone. And a lot of times it's older. A lot of times it's a little bit more mature believers. Their pots are more cracked than our pots. They're just older, it happens. But the person in there is so happy, is so encouraging. Like the soil is so rich, that your thought is like, man, this thing needs a better pot, which, that's a, okay, so Romans 9:3, in order that God may make known the riches of his glory upon vessels of mercy, which he prepared before unto glory. Vessels, like your vessel. He also calls us. All right, so we've got this picture. God has a plan to distribute goods, which are himself, and the way he does that is a person, Christ. This man, Jesus. You interacting with Jesus is how you gain more of what is valuable to God, which is the person of God. And what that looks like is, like we talked about, some of God planted in you, growing and spreading out and transforming and glorifying. Both of those words we use in Romans. If you've been around for a bit, heard us say those. Transforming and glorifying the messy sand that you were into living soil, a living, fresh person that expresses God. Well, what's the water? I said you have to water a seed. What does that mean in this picture? God's Spirit. Boom. Okay, so God has a plan. God has a way he likes to be experienced by. God is as God, he is God. He literally is what the universe exists within. How do you experience that? I can't even go experience the universe. I have to stay down here under a nice thick atmosphere to keep all this gamma ray bursts from frying my noodle. It's I can't go out there and experience that. Space is cool. Now that I'm over 25 with a prefrontal cortex, I'm not that interested in going. Weird things happen to you when you go over there. So I can't even directly experience the universe that exists within God. How do I experience God directly? You don't. You can't. He's the invisible, unapproachable God. These are the words the Bible uses. So he became a man. He became Jesus. Well, okay, how do I experience Jesus? It sounds more reasonable, right? But can you go do it? Go experience Jesus. Yeah, exactly. It's giving me a good Super Saiyan thing going on. You can't. For one thing, we're historically removed from this man's life on earth. But even if you had existed a couple thousand years ago in Jerusalem or in Nazareth, that wouldn't have helped you. Peter was right next to Jesus and was equally dumb as us, arguably more impulsive and dumb than a number of us. If you want to see a big hot mess, read about Peter in the Gospels. He just said what was on his mind, shamelessly. God of the universe, right there. On your map. It's beautiful. Read Peter in the Gospels, and then go read Peter's epistles near the end of the New Testament. What even happened? That is a picture. This is kind of an aside. That is what will happen to you if you have 5 minutes morning time every morning for 15, 20 years. You will go from the guy who is constant foot in mouth and ends his career denying Christ as he's dying for you on the cross. You will become the kind of person who can write 1st and 2nd Peter, some of the most genuine, rich books, rich letters you can read. So it's that's the seed putting out roots and transforming that soil. It's amazing. So anyway, that's a whole project. I haven't given you one already. Read Gospel Peter, read Epistles Peter. That's the before and sometime after. Well, okay, so obviously being next to the man, Jesus, wasn't doing Peter all that much good. what changed? 3 years with Christ, and at the end of 3 years, he denies Christ. Like, what changed in Peter? Not much. So what happened between Christ dying and rising from the dead and Peter becoming this man who could write these epistles that are so full of Christ? Anybody? Time?
He had kids.
He may have already had kids in the gospel, which makes it even more questionable why he's still there. There was a change. There was a change in how he was interacting with Jesus. He had been interacting face to face, like human face to human face with Jesus. In the way you would interact with like dad or professor or after Christ died and rose from the dead, except for a very short, about 40 days, that's not how Peter interacted with Christ anymore. He didn't interact with Jesus like that anymore. He actually interacted with Jesus the exact same way you interact with Jesus, through prayer, by the Spirit, like intangible, mysterious. And that is actually what made the difference. You would think like, oh man, if I had been with Jesus, whoo-wee, that would have been so good. Like, well, whoo-wee, you'd be just as dumb as you are. Ain't that changed. But if you have the kind of experiences that you can have, like Peter had, in the same way that you can have them, that you're actually required to have experience with Christ now, which is in prayer, by faith, in spirit. That's where this happens. That's where this depositing, watering happens. And so you said, how do we experience Christ? What is the water in this picture of watering? It's the Spirit. And so in the same sense that, Rebecca, I heard you talking about how Arkansas has so many minerals, so many metals and minerals in the soil. How do those, what brings those minerals into the plants? It's the water tube. Water flows through the soil and picks up all these things. Well, that's what the Spirit is doing. In all fairness, God's complicated. Yes, God is the Father, and He is the Son, and He's the Spirit. And no, those are not three separate things. It's complicated. Talk about it. But in some sense, God as the Spirit flows. God as the Father is manifested in a way that can be perceived. That's Christ. Christ is not something separate from God. He is God being expressed. And then that God being expressed is picked up and flowed out. That's God as the Spirit. So the Spirit who reaches you is the man who died on the cross for you, who is the God that created a universe in which He wanted you to exist. So what's so cool is that you receive this little story like I planted, and then day by day, just this little kind of mysterious watering comes to you. The Spirit just kind of gets poured into you, little bit by little bit, and these roots spread. Something really mysterious is happening in your being. I've already covered 3 of these here. And the result down the road is that, in the talents example, if you've participated in this, if you just keep coming back for the watering, then that seed has increased, and in short order, that seed will have borne more seeds. Which, what do you do with more seeds? You plant them in other pots. Like we all know we should preach the gospel. Have you ever been so happy about your salvation you did preach the gospel? Not like you weren't thinking, oh, I should preach the gospel. I went to Bible school. I've preached the gospel many days because today I should go preach the gospel. Did it. Wasn't that fun? Did it. On a few occasions, I've been so happy about my salvation that I preached the gospel. A few of the times, it was just because I was trying to explain why I'm so awkwardly happy. It's like, the only way I know to make this less weird is to give you a good reason why I'm like this. That's the gospel. That's you having been watered to the extent that your little seed has shot up and has seeds. You know, and people are like, whoa, what is that? You know, it's just, you know, seed in pot. Water that. Anyway, so that's God. That's the other end of God. You know, God's economy on one end is himself discreetly getting a seed of life in, and then arranging your life day after day, initially all on his own to water that seed. And then as we grow up, he actually kind of steps back a little bit more because he wants us to grow into coming to him for the watering morning after morning. So, by the way, if 3 or 4 years out of college, having a joyful, vibrant experience as a believer seems a little more subtle, a little more difficult than it was, you know, in college when you're like 18, 20, 21. That's normal. You know, that's God stepping back a little bit so that you will come forward. So don't ever be discouraged by that. And eventually what happens is the Christ in you has grown to the point that now you're ready for the other side of God's economy to happen. He has taken one seed and put it in Brandon. And he's watered, you know, God's watered, Brandon's watered, you know, they've had this dance for a while. Now all of a sudden, there's some more seeds coming out of Brandon. And Phoebe is just like talking to Brandon, I'm so happy. Why do you just like sing? Like, what's happening? You know, why are you a musical walking? Well, Phoebe, like, it's because I've met this person, Jesus. Like, this is why I am the way I am. You know, and then it's like, boom, that explanation, you know, is the gospel, planting a seed in people, and then the cycle repeats. You know, so that's the stewardship. You know, you'll see Paul talk about the stewardship, the others, which is also the same word, economius. Anyway, there's some different fiddly bits on the back end of that in Greek that make it not economy, but economist, basically. Like when you see steward, Paul calling himself a steward, he kind of essentially saying, I'm an economist of, I'm a distributor of the goods. There's a distribution of the goods, and there are distributors of the goods. That's how this happens. You know, that's the way that it can happen. That's the way that it does happen. And that's the way that makes God happy for it to happen. And so, you know, and it's in spirit, so it doesn't happen physically. You know, I don't know, get like, you know, a few ounces of the flesh of Christ per year and like invest physically, like plant them in soil, and I don't know, it's getting weird. You know, it's nothing like that. See, it's weird. It's definitely not weird like that. It's in spirit. It's in faith. You know, Paul says, God's economy, that is in faith or by faith. And it happens with God as the Spirit in our spirit. You know, there's an effect in our soul and over time that is observable. But the transactions, the events are not in your soul, they're not in your feelings, they're not in your thoughts, they're in your spirit, which you interact with by faith. And so what this leads to, I'll wrap up here. What this leads to is God as the Father, who, you know, there's God as a Spirit. Okay, so God as the Spirit, in some sense, could be described as God reaching you. The only way that you experience God is as God the Spirit. God in the Son is God being manifested. God as the Father is God in the unknowable sense, you know, in the sense that God is beyond, you know, and is anyway. He's the source. He's the source of everything, you know. There was the ultimate result of this economy, this way of dispensing the person and nature and being of God into humans in a way that multiplies among them and spreads and produces an expression, like that fresh, bright, living soil versus, crumbly sand, city sand. What is the result of that happening is that the whole universe will say, wow, the God, the hidden, unknowable God is so amazing, so glorious. There must be a God who is beyond all of this. Because how else could this happen? Like how else? Anyway, but so that's the point. The church displays God's wisdom in his economy. His plan, the way this happens, proves that God is wise beyond comprehension. Because the more you see this play out, the more you're like, wow, there was no better way for this to happen. There was no other way this could, there was no other way to take broken pots of sand and produce vibrant, fresh, seed-bearing, fruit-bearing plants of rooted in rich soil. There was no other way in broken pots, which, by the way, the plant and the soil get transplanted to a not broken, wonderful pot. If you know what I mean. After all of this, you don't live for eternity in this pot, which the older you get, the nicer the sound. My knees are not feeling great, guys. So that's what is so cool about this, is as we mature and we start bearing fruit, the result is not that people realize how exceptional we've become and how moral we are and how wonderful, whatever. The more this happens, the more people realize how sweet and precious Christ is, and how wise and just how wise, how infinite, how amazing God the Father is. I think I've covered everything I'll say here. So the believer's stewardship, you have some responsibility. I think everyone knows. I think a lot of us know that when you're saved, you are saved. You're saved. You've been born again. You are now a child of God. There's not an offense for which your parents, I hope, and definitely not for which God your Father will chop your head. That's just not the way you deal with children. You don't recycle them when they're bad. You discipline them. You recycle robots. I've been kind of into machine learning lately. Neural net, just really goes nuts, doing weird things. Delete file, done. Literally start over from scratch. Initialize a bunch of randomness, make it better. That's the way you deal with robots. That's not the way you deal with children. Liam is starting to climb, he likes to ride in a laundry basket. As of today, he likes to climb on top of the laundry basket. You know what happens when a toddler stands on top of the laundry basket? He falls off the laundry basket. I'm not going to recycle my child because he gets started doing unwise things. We're going to train our child to do wise things. Eventually, we'll get there. It'll take time. God does not recycle us. God doesn't do away with us. He disciplines us. So we know in that sense that once we're saved, we are God's saved. But we also know we have some responsibility. I think everyone has some sense that now that I'm saved, something should happen. I'm responsible in some sense, somehow, to God for something. Which honestly, that sense is why we very often get off into trying to be good. Because we do know we have some responsibility towards God. And then our flesh comes in and is like, yeah, you should try and be good. You're pretty bad. You should work on that. Try and be good already. Which is not what God wants. Your responsibility towards God is to go get water. Don't try super gluing the pot together. Take your pot and go get it water. Because the water is what accomplishes what God wants. God's dispensing, and then your stewardship is the result of receiving what God is dispensing. The more God pours into you, the more you will inevitably have to dispense it to someone else. You know, eventually, if I keep filling your cup up, eventually you will have to put that water somewhere. I want you to put the water somewhere. You know, it's like, I want you to water the plants. I'll just keep filling your pot up, your water pot. You're gonna have to pour it somewhere. That's the way God is with you. He's like, I'm just gonna keep pouring into you. Eventually you will water something. You know, you may just get so excited. You know, my father-in-law sometimes just gets so excited about some verses he was reading in the morning. He just starts telling people at the nursing home, his nurses at work, and his doctor, like the nurses who work for him at work, just starts coming out. He just starts watering people. You know, that's normal. That's what it's supposed to look like. That's the stewardship from our side. You know, that's what you're responsible for in your relationship with God. So that cycle, you know, this whole cycle of you having experience by experience transactions with Jesus, who is the person of God expressed, filling up your vessel, your person, with who and what God is, and then you overflowing that to other people, that's godly conduct. That's the distribution of good. That's the point of the whole thing. Like, if it weren't for that, why have you? So, I guess I'll wrap it up there.